Good evening, everyone. Yang Yan Zhao back again. Although it looks like maybe my camera froze. We'll check
It does
that
look
out.
that way.
Oh, no. Yeah, it always waits until I start for something to go wrong. But welcome, everyone, while I try to get this thing fixed. Tonight, we have special guest Dojo Kun,
Greetings.
who
Thank you so much
is
for having me.
a longtime comics author, publisher, here in the indie scene. Tonight, he's going to tell us all about doing adaptations of novels.
Yes, it's a different animal.
So first of all, just tell us all a little bit about yourself. How did you get into comics?
Okay. When I was 7 years old, yeah, I know that's a few days ago. When I was 7 years old, I got my first two on the way to Florida. Family used to drive there rather than fly. So I read my first two, and it started the collecting bug right from day one. First two I got were X-Men 126 and Amazing Spider-Man 196. I still have those two
Nice.
very issues too. They're well loved. But so I collected for 50 years. And in 2014, I decided that I'd try to write my own. And I looked all over the Marvel site after I honed what I thought was a great script for She-Hulk, one of my favorite characters. I thought I'd look all over the Marvel site and find, okay, where do I submit this? It's a little bit harder for a writer than an artist because I really can't show you something. You've got to read it. So I looked all over for where to submit it. And there's a tiny little paragraph on the website, or at least there was at the time, that says, yeah, you don't. Basically, it says, go get published and we'll find you. So I was like, oh, okay. So how do I do that? I found a website called zwol.org. ZWOL is short for the person who runs it. His last name is Walensky. And on the site, you can find writers, artists, colorists, letterers, everything, all of the different components to making a comic. So as I was looking there, I was looking for different ads. And one of the ads that came up, very surprisingly, was we need somebody who can write comics and help us with our accounting. I'm like, okay, well, that's what I've done for 16 years. I was an accountant. I'm an auditor. I'm a fraud examiner, anti-money laundering specialist. So I'm like, well, shoot, do you know me? So I sent them my resume and I sent them my script. I said, I know She-Hulk's not your character. You can't use this script, but you can see whether or not I can write if you look at the script. So within a few hours, they called and hired me to write for their company. So I wrote for two small press companies. One was called Affinity Storm Press and then Red King Press. In both instances, let's just say we parted ways. And then I decided, you know what? I think, excuse me, I think that I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. So I started publishing in 2014. I've been publishing there for close to 10 years now, which is just hard to believe. And at the beginning, you know, the comic books I did they weren't monthly, but they were like the monthlies. They were small floppy comic books. And the first comics I produced as Dojo Kun Comics was called Siamese. It was a 4-issue miniseries. And boy, there's so many neat things that came about with that. As I was looking for an artist, wasn't finding one. And I'm in the hospital waiting room, okay, waiting for someone to get out of surgery. And I'm just flipping through magazines, whatever they had on the table, because I was bored out of my mind. And I came across this nursing magazine, not like baby feeding, like nursing, like nurses with a stethoscope. And there was an ad in there for like a software program that nurses use. But it was in comic book form. It was just a one-page ad. And I'm like, hey, this guy's pretty good. Or gal, I didn't know because there was no artist's signature on it. But there was an ad agency at the bottom that said, you know, this ad is produced by so-and-so. So I contacted them and I said, I'd really like to talk to your artist on this ad. And they're like, well, he's hiking the Appalachians right now, but when he comes back, we can get him in touch with you. And they did. And this guy has never been a comic book artist before. He's actually a fine art portrait painter.
Oh,
So this comic book thing was just a one-off for him. But I said, would you be interested in drawing some comics? He was like, yeah, why not? We'll give it a shot. So he did issues 1 and 2 of Siamese. And I think he did a great job. He was fun to work with and all that. We became friends. We still are. He had to leave the project, though, after number 2 because he was commissioned to do a portrait of somebody's deceased son. And his portraits, he would get, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, he would get many thousands of dollars for doing somebody's portrait. So
wow.
I completely understood why he wanted to, work on that instead of my little comic book.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was, sentimental value to it as well. So I found another artist to do number 3 and 4, and his name is Zilson Costa. Zilson is doing the art for the comic we'll be talking about in just a little bit here.
Oh, nice.
So we've been working together also for quite a while, Zilson and I. So that's how I got into comic books. But then there's the question, why crowdfunding if you were, publishing comics before? And the easy answer there, of course, is funds. It's a very expensive prospect when you are just the writer. I always say that hashtag just the writer, because, I've got to hire an artist. And sometimes you have to do a penciler and an inker. Sometimes you can find one who can do both. Then you've got to get a colorist, a letterer. And in some cases, and I really advise, you get an editor too. For my project, Projectile Reptile, I had an editor who, thanks, Jake. Jake's one of my co-hosts. And he's a great supporter of the project. So yeah, an editor on Projectile Reptile is pretty important because he pointed out a few things that I think made the book even better.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so how long did it really take you to sort of like figure out from, just being sort of a fan and until you figure out like, yeah, I can do this. And you sort of have the formula down pat, how to produce a comic.
Well, fortunately, because I went and joined those 2 other small press companies, I didn't have to wear all of the hats that I'm wearing now. I was able to be hashtag just the writer, and I helped them with some accounting, like I told you a few minutes ago. But yeah, I got to see someone else wearing all those hats, sort of wrangling the cats, if you will, trying to find people who will do all those tasks. So as I saw them doing it, in some instances, it was a learning experience. In other instances, I told myself, I probably could have handled that better. Or I think that I'm a better leader than those guys were. And I think that, I could bring people together with trust, transparency, and things like that. So that's why I thought I could do it on my own.
Nice. And so that brings us up to Healing Wars, which is your current project.
That's right.
And
yeah,
this one's a little different because this is an adaptation of an actual novel.
Yes, it's the beginning of the adaptation. Janice Hardy wrote a trilogy of novels called The Healing Wars. The first one that she wrote is The Shifter. Oops, on camera. There we are. And as you can see, I got my tabs in it and everything. The Shifter starts off the hero's journey for the main character, Maya. But before we get into the story at all, it's very, very interesting how it came about because it was just super coincidental. I didn't seek out a novel to make an adaptation of. I sort of fell into this. It took some effort, but my wife had read the trilogy, and she knew that I liked things like Wheel of Time, The Hunger Games, Divergent. She said, if you like those things, The Sword of Truth, if you like those books, you'll like this one. She said, now, this book is written mostly young adult. She said, but I think you're going to like it anyway because it's right up the same kind of hero's story that you like. So I gave it a shot. I read all 3 novels during the week. And I thought, this is great. Now, I don't normally talk to my friends about the novels I read. I just buy them, enjoy them, and put them away. But I had just finished the 3rd one. And then my friend Steve called. It was completely, not about the books. But I had just finished it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if Steve would take a chance to read it. So I said, I've got the books. You're welcome to borrow them. And I told him what it was. He goes, yeah, I read The Healing Wars. I love that series. He goes, do you want to talk to the author? I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I work with her husband. That's how I got the novels. Is her husband wanted me to read it and see what I thought. I'm like, you work with her husband? It's like, yeah, We both work remotely. He's in another state, and but yeah, so so he got me in touch with Janice, the author of this trilogy, and I said to Janice, this might be out of left field. I said, but would you ever consider allowing a comic book company to adapt your novel into comic book form? And she and her husband are kind of comic fans, maybe not like you and I
Oh.
are, but
Hmm.
they're kind of comic fans. They used to read them, or they read them now and then, or they love the movies. And she said that's kind of exciting. That would be cool. So we took some time to hammer out a deal. I have a license with her. It's an exclusive license for a certain number of years, and and what's great about this project is I have the prose author as the editor.
Oh,
So
nice.
so what that'll help me do is not just find any errors that are made, because that's what editors do, but it'll also help keep her vision a part of the project. There's no chance of me going far afield or doing it wrong or whatever. In fact, there was a part of the script that I'd written that adapted part of her novel, and she said, instead of that one, in order to move this forward, how about put this chapter in? And so, yeah,
Hmm.
obviously, I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
author. So yeah, it's working out great. She's been on a couple of streams with me, so she's a fun personality too. And yeah, I'm really hoping this sees the light of day, because I really think this can reach a wide audience, not just because it's all ages, which is a benefit, but also too because there's a lot of crossover between the novel reading community and the comic book community, I think.
I think so too. Yeah, especially in certain genres.
Yes.
So now that you're working with an author, like what are sort of the places where working with the author directly makes it easier, and what sort of pitfalls do you think people could run into when they're
Yeah,
working with something that's somebody else's baby, so to speak?
exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about that before it came on, obviously. And when I'm writing my own stories, I can take it where I want to go, and if I do something and think, yeah, you know what, I'm going to use that later. I'm going to do something different here. But all of the things that I could change, that's one of sort of the pitfalls with working with somebody else's baby. You need to make sure that
Yeah.
you maintain their vision, that their story doesn't get you. I know a lot of folks in the mainstream are changing everything to fit their own agendas, but that's not how I want to do this. I want to make this book reflective of what Janice wrote. Because after all, the whole reason I want to do this is I liked the way Janice wrote it. You know what I mean? She did such a great job on these novels. So I want to preserve that vision. So, okay, so that's the pitfall, is it's hard to work with somebody else's IP and make sure you do it right. Like I said, though, fortunately with her as the editor, that helps a lot. Now, one of the things that makes it easier is the story is already written from beginning
Mhm.
to end. It's a hero's journey. I've got all of the characters are already created, and all of those things make writing the script a little easier. And I only say a little because, again, it's difficult to take the hundreds and hundreds of pages that are here and boil it down to. And what I did was, this is going to, hopefully, if everything goes well, this will be 5-issue miniseries per novel.
Oh,
So,
nice.
so the plan is pretty long reaching. It hopes to be 15 issues of the Healing Wars. And of course, we're starting with the first few chapters of the first book. And so that narrows 94 pages of the novel down to this 32-page book.
Wow. Okay. So you worked with Janice to decide like which chapter should go in, or was it more like you came up with it and then she like sort of signed off on it, or?
Right. I decided what parts of it I thought would move the comic book along. And there was just that one suggestion she had where she wanted me to drop one chapter and bring another one in.
Mhm.
So, yeah, most of it, though, a picture tells 1,000 words, right? However, sometimes the exposition's needed. So it's
Yep.
a fine balance between not wanting to put too many words per panel and not wanting to overload the reader with exposition, because sometimes comic books can be kind of cumbersome when that happens. On the other hand, there are some times where the information provided in her book is necessary and there's not a lot of action. So you've got to come up with not just two faces looking at each other talking. You know what I mean? You've got to sort
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
change the setting, do something to make it visually exciting such that the story can progress.
Hmm. Um, and so, about how long do you anticipate each of these issues to be?
I'm gonna think about 32 pages per issue. I've already written
Okay.
the first 5 issues of this series that will cover this first novel, and then I've already started working on the 5 issues that will go for the second novel, which is Blue Fire.
Hmm.
So now the question becomes: if the first comic book is called The Shifter, what am I going to call the second comic book, which is from The Shifter? And I do have some ideas of that too. So
Ah.
there's some of the chapter names that Janice used will be perfect for comic book titles, in my opinion.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, how long does it usually take your production company to make a comic? It's usually if you're not working for one of the big two, it's going to take a lot longer than the normal like monthly period to produce something. So considering like you have to arrange for an artist who's not full-time employee and
Right.
everything, how long would it usually take to produce something, do you think?
It's I think that if the funds are available and this
Mhm.
artist can work, during his off time, because not only is he not a full-time artist for me, he's not a full-time artist. He's got a day job. And he's also he's also part of a Portuguese rock band in Brazil.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
he's a Brazilian artist. So yeah, he and I sort of have that in common. I'm a singer, he's a guitarist. So he does that on the weekends too. So his availability is also limited. However, once he finishes a page, I can immediately give it to the colorist, and then as soon as the colorist is done, I can give it to the letterer, and that might all happen before the next page is done. So you keep it sort of in a production line. Having said all that, to answer your
Mhm.
question, I'm thinking that if the funds became available, it would take probably a year to get it all done.
Okay,
Now,
that's
16% of the book
mhm.
is already done. And the reason that is done, I paid for that part out of my pocket so that I had something to put on the campaign you have on the screen.
Ah,
If you don't have some of the art ahead of time, people don't know, well, I mean, yeah, the story might sound good, but is it going to look any good? Am I going to pay
yeah.
for something and then I'm going to be like, oh, this looks terrible? But no, Zilson's art is fantastic. He did the cover you have on the screen right now. Um, he does all of the interiors of this book, and like I said earlier, he did Siamese 3 and 4. So he's a tried and true member of the Dojo Kun staff. He's just brilliant to work with. Despite the fact that English isn't his first language, it may not even be his second or third language, because a lot of people in Brazil speak multiple languages. He interprets my script very, very well. I mean, there are times where he'll come up with something that I didn't actually put in the script, and it's better. So
Oh.
now, when I write my scripts, uh, I've been an actor since I was in the 6th grade. So I picture these things like they are a script, like a
Mhm.
screenplay or a play. So I have the blocking, I have the camera angle, if you will. I know it's not actually a camera, but I say, from above her shoulder, we see this and things like that. And for the most part, Zilson interprets it and does it exactly the way I ask. But once in a while, and I give him this leeway, once in a while he says, I think that this would be better served if we did this. And uh, I'll say it, so far, 100% of the times he has said, I think this would be better, it was.
Nice.
So I love to go with his instincts.
Yeah, it's always good when you have somebody who, not only are they just interested in the project, but they want to improve everything to make it the best that it can be.
Yes. And I've always said this. I think that the artist is just as much a storyteller as the writer, because they have to capture so much of what the writer has put on the page, and they have to capture facial expressions and fluidity on the page, because it is, after all, a static medium, but you have to
Mhm.
be able to show movement and action and excitement. And the artist is very important to that whole concept.
Definitely. Um, and so, how long did it sort of take you to build this core team that you have that works on your books?
Um, Boy, I would say it took about 4 years before I got the group of people that I'm very confident that I can come back to each time. Now, as you said before, they're not full-time Dojo Kuns. They're free to work with other people too, and some of them have. But and sometimes I've had to move from one creative team member to another because they've either moved on to other projects or just things didn't work out for us. But yeah, the team I have now, so Zilson doing the art, we've already talked about that. Josh Rodriguez is the colorist, and no relation to Renzo Rodriguez, who did one of the covers. So yeah, there's Renzo's cover right there. So it's colored, or it's the art there is by Renzo Rodriguez, colored by Josh Rodriguez, no relation. But so Josh is sort of new to the indie scene and doing a great job, as you can see there on that cover. And then Paul Bird is my letterer, and Paul is known for being his own comic creator. He's doing the book called Fall of Man. So if you've heard of Fall of Man, he's also a letterer, and he's working on my project. Oh yeah, there's the whole team. And then the one who created the logo and who has been giving me campaign advice right from the very beginning is Rusty Gilligan. Now, some of you might remember Rusty was a child actor on television, and he was also a member of the WWE.
What?
Yeah. He's a former wrestler. So, yeah, there he is. See, he's a good guy. So, yeah, he's loads of fun. He's got his hands in a lot of different creative endeavors. And he and I have been friendly acquaintances since maybe before I started Dojo Kun. He and I may have been talking since like 2012.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about the story. What can we expect?
So the story is set in what I think I would call like a Renaissance, right between the medieval era and the Renaissance industrial era. So there are carriages. They're still on horseback. They have swords rather than guns. But there is, there are armies. And in this instance, Naya, the main character who's in the top panel, they're about to steal that chicken's eggs. She is the main protagonist. She is an orphan. She's homeless, and she has abilities that only a very few people in her world have. And that is, she is what's known as a taker. She can take the pain from someone's body if they have an injury. So, and her sister is a taker too. It kind of runs in families. And those kids that are takers belong to the Healers League. So then why isn't she in that? Her powers are flawed. She can't push that pain into the blue metal known as pinvium. Now, when they push the pain into pinvium, they then fashion pinvium into weapons. So if you can imagine that the sword has pain in it, in addition to the pain that the sword causes, you'll also get the pain of like 10 other people from, various wounds that they received, so that the sword becomes even more effective. But her power, she can't push it into that blue metal. She can only push it into another person. So what she worries about there is if the conquering nation that has taken over her country finds out she can do that, she's worried that they're going to weaponize her against her own people, and that she'll be forced to shift pain. That's why it's called the shifter. She shifts pain from one person to another. So so she's kind of destitute. That's why she's trying to steal eggs there at the beginning. So yeah, she's not perfect. She's trying to steal to live. And then she meets Danello there on that first page. He's got that wicked sword that you see close up on the Renzo cover. And another thing about that sword. Yeah, there it is. I love the design of that sword. That was Zilson's idea. I just think it's cool. Now, I don't see how you could put that into a sheath, but that's okay. It looks pretty wicked.
All right. It looks cool.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the great things about it is I have what is included in the top tier is the 3D printed Danello's blade.
Oh, nice. And it is that so that's only for the top tier, you said. Is it
That's right.
Limited or unlimited?
It's limited to 10. I've got a local guy who'll print this for me, and this right here takes 16 hours to print.
Oh, wow.
So yes, and because it's the two pieces, it's got Danello's blade. I don't know if you can tell, it's got that raised lettering there. So it does take quite a while to print this. And the 3D printer has to be fairly large to, okay. I love the dark red and black ink that he uses too, or filament. I guess it's not ink. Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, that looks really nice. I want to get a full-size version of that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I wonder if he could print that in stages and then like glue it or something.
Maybe. Okay.
Oh, so the story, yes. So the puzzle pieces you see at the top there is her going through her day trying to find work. The fact that it's in puzzle pieces was Zilson's idea. It's another one of those things that Zilson came up with. So she finds out that the Healers League isn't all that it's purported to be. There are others outside the Healers League that sell the pain or sell the ability to absorb pain from people. They're called the pain merchants. And she's got to decide if she's going to go try and sell her abilities to the pain merchants because they're pretty shady too. So what's interesting about the story too along the way is she doesn't become a Mary Sue, suddenly knows everything about her powers and she's going to save the day, right? She's got a lot of moral dilemmas that she faces. And sometimes, in my opinion, as every human does, she makes some bad decisions. So some of the things that she does along the way gets her in a lot of trouble. So she's got to work her way through that. And she has some allies and enemies along the way. So yeah, it's a great hero's journey story. And like I said, it's a lot like the Hunger Games, where the antagonist or Divergent, where the antagonist at the beginning doesn't really know what she will eventually become.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty interesting journey to follow her along.
Yes.
And so with this, I noticed too that 20-page ash can.
That one's fun. I know a lot of people like the various stickers, bookmarks, magnets, etc. In this case, I wanted to go with the ash can because I love it when I back a campaign and I get additional content. This one here is sort of a behind the scenes, how the character development, the character sketches were made, and the chibi stickers, how that was made. You know, talking with my artist on the chibi sticker. So I love the behind the scenes thing, and this 20-page book is full of that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm one of the few people who doesn't like all the magnets and stickers and stuff. I would much rather have an ash can or, you know, like an extra B story or something.
Right. I'm with you.
Very cool. So, as a guy who's been in the business for just about 10 years, how has it really changed since when you started to now? Like, what are the big differences, I'd say?
Well, one of the things that happened was at the very beginning, I had all these characters in mind, and I was posting them on Facebook one at a time. I had an artist do a commission of these characters, and I would put them on Facebook and ask people their opinions. And one guy reached out to me and said, "Brian, I think maybe you should get published before you start putting your characters out on Facebook." And I said, "Oh, well, I am published. I have, I've got like 12 books that I've." And he's like, "Oh, well, have you heard about this indie comic crowdfunding crowd?" And I'm like, "No, actually, I had no idea. Didn't even know what crowdfunding was at the time." He's like, "Oh boy, I have some news for you." So he got me interested in becoming part of the indie scene and crowdfunding my comics. So what I did was I took that first miniseries I talked about, Siamese, and I put it all together in a trade paperback. So I had a product right from the start to get my company name out there and to let people know if I'm any good at this whole thing. You know what I mean? So now, after having been on a lot of shows like this one, and in the chat in a lot of shows where I wasn't on screen, but just becoming a part of the community, a lot of people were very welcoming right from the start, which I thought was great. It was like, yeah, I found my people. You know what I mean? These are the people who love comic books. And when I brought Siamese into crowdfunding, it funded within 3 days.
Wow.
I was ecstatic. I mean, they really saw that the art was great from Mike and Zilson. So I had a lot of art that I could show because I had 4 issues worth. I was able to pick the best panels and the most exciting shots. And I think that made a big difference that people backed it. And yes, I fulfilled. So that helped a lot too, because when you fulfill, then people begin to, increase their
trust you
confidence.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this guy not only can he write a story and maybe get somebody to do some art, but he can also end up producing the comic book. Now, Siamese broke even, and part of the reason for that was shipping. Shipping overseas was incredibly expensive. It was right about when the boom happened for shipping costs because of, I guess it was because of COVID. I came into this indie scene in about late 2020, and I did Siamese in 2021. So it was right in the thick of COVID. Shipping prices went up dramatically. It cost $65 to send a single comic book, this single comic book to Australia, for example. So yeah, it was far more than I had charged anybody for shipping. So I ate a lot of cost, and any of the profits that I made just went to shipping, packaging, and postage. Oh, that is shipping, printing, packaging, and postage. So that there, it broke even. Now, if my comics always broke even, I'd be happy. That's awesome, because this is a hobby for me. It's not my day job. You know, so, I mean, is it an expensive hobby? Yeah, it sure is. But if it paid for itself, that would be ideal. Well, ideal would be make a bunch of money, I guess. but if it could pay for itself, I'd be happy. Now, Projectile Reptile, was my fourth campaign because 2 in between failed. So unfortunately, I don't know if it was a matter of the economy. And I know we were talking a little bit about that before we came on air, is, a lot of people are saying that their campaigns are struggling recently, even people who previously were very successful. And I think that, yes, part of it is the economy, and whether or not Biden is to blame for the economy, Trump is to blame. I don't even want to get into who it is, but the economy is what it is. And the cost of groceries has just skyrocketed, and gasoline is kind of fluctuating. But that's one thing. I think another thing is there's a lot of people coming into indie comic books who were industry pros. And if you're an industry pro, you've already got a fan base. Likely you're bringing a lot of fans with you. But at the same time, there's a lot of people already in this indie sphere who read your comics for years. And now they're going to say, oh, Mike Barron has come out with a comic? Well, then, yeah, I'm going to back Mike Barron. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, he's quirky and very opinionated, but he's a very cool guy, and he's a great writer. He's been on my show a few times, and Mike Barron is fun to talk to. And I think there are a lot of people who have a lot of confidence that his book is going to be funny or exciting or, all of those things. So they're more likely to back a known, commodity than an unknown,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anchorite's cat's got a good point there. Yeah, it is an elemental force. And yeah, it does affect a lot of people. So I think that a lot of people have a finite amount of, disposable income. Yeah. So if you back a lot of projects, and I used to back a lot of projects, I don't so much anymore because I have to pick and choose. The economy being what it is, I just can't afford to do it like I used to. And the fact that, Projectile Reptile, I started to say, it hasn't broken even yet. It's still in demand. I need to get that printed and sent out to the backers. It has to be. I may have to bite the bullet on that and take a loss. But yeah, I was going to say, if the loss continues, then Dojo Kun can't continue. I've talked to my spouse about that, and I promised her if this doesn't make it, this becomes an extremely expensive hobby, and can't continue. However, this project, The Shifter, I think can reach a much wider audience than just the indie sphere. And that's one of the reasons on this Fund My Comic campaign, I gave it so much time. On Fund My Comic, you're able to give it as much time as you want. So I gave it an entire year to reach its goal. As you can see there, I've got 10 backers so far. It's been going on for 2 months now. Been on a number of shows. I need to get on some more, and I need to reach out to maybe Janice's fan base, maybe some other novel readers that haven't really put their toes into the comic book realm, that are sort of, I wouldn't say that they're elitist and don't think comics are an actual art, but on the other hand, if they see that it's a novel that's being adapted to a comic book, maybe they'll make that leap.
I think so. I think this is one of, in my opinion, I've been doing this for about 4 years, on and off, more or less on. And the people I've seen come through, that's one thing that I've noticed a lot of is people, they really want to hit indie comics, Comicsgate, whatever you want to call it. But then, like let's say they have a sci-fi story and I say, oh, have you reached out to sci-fi communities? No. Have you tried to
Right.
get in on any sci-fi channels? No. And it's unfortunate. It's one of the reasons why I have so many like Dungeons and Dragons videos on this channel, because people who like comics often play Dungeons and Dragons, and people who play Dungeons and Dragons often they read comics for quite a while and just something took them out, like there was nothing for them or whatever, but they would probably be interested if they saw something. So that's one of the things I always recommended to people was, yeah, you should, of course, comics buyers should be your main target, because obviously they spend money on comics, but you also want to hit all these other related groups. Like, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Starting with, I don't know if Janice has any YouTube presence or Facebook or whatever she's got, but if she could sort of give you a little in on that side, and then hopefully that'll give you a little bit of credibility with other novelists and other writers in the writing community, because then it's not like, I think one thing from their point of view too is often, like the publishing company just arbitrarily gave some comic company the rights to do this project and, just going to do a slapdash job. But I think if you can show like, oh no, it's the actual author, wants it and she's all excited about it. To me, that's the perfect way to get in with a lot of these other communities.
I would agree. If this works and I'm able to produce these, I'd love to find other projects like this one that has, that hasn't been adapted yet into comic book form, and see if there's another author out there that would love to come under the Dojo Kun banner and have me write the script for them. If they see this one as a success, I think that they would, be more likely to do that. And I think you're right. In addition to the D&D community who likes comics, there's sci-fi. This is kind of science fiction fantasy. So like I said, I'd liken this to like Hunger Games, but also, I mean, even just like the collectible trading card games, like Magic the Gathering has a certain, a crossover between, comic fans and Magic fans. I played Magic for several decades. I haven't for a while, but, Magic the Gathering and D&D used to play that for a very long time too. So, I know those two realms of fans, and you're right. I need to reach out to them as well.
Then I think YA communities would be good. This like seems right up their alley too. I think there's a lot of good leads and good possibilities personally.
I agree.
Have you thought about adapting public domain stories, like, for example, Dracula or Frankenstein, do like
Mickey
a horror
Mouse?
collection or, well,
I know he just went into public domain a couple days ago.
I've been meaning to do a video about this, but what do you think about all the people? Like I've seen a ton of people saying, oh, I'm going to do a Mickey Mouse comic where he's a mass murderer. Another one's like, oh, he's a psychopath. What do you think about those projects?
I think that those people are either looking for parody, which I see some value in parody, or trying to deconstruct the character, which that I'm sort of against. If your idea is just to tear Mickey Mouse down, don't be silly. That character has been around since before pretty much all of us have been born. So, don't do that. Don't tear it down. But yeah, if it's for comedic effect, then sure, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, some of us have been complaining for years that certain groups of people have injected all sorts of crazy sexual fetishes into popular mainstream characters. And your response to that is to inject extreme violence into those same characters.
Right,
like,
yeah.
How is that any different? To me, like the best thing you could do is make like the greatest adventure comic ever where, Mickey's heading down the Amazon on the boat and stuff. Like,
yeah.
Disney used to make great adventure comics. Why don't you out adventure comic Disney? Make something
Great
better
idea.
than whatever crap they're doing.
Yes. Now, a few comics have come out recently with public domain characters. Uh, Von Klaus with his Black
Mhm.
Terror, or it's
Yeah, yeah,
Terror in the
yeah.
Trenches. And Terror in the Trenches, I think I read it. I backed it. I read it. It's a great story, and that's a public domain character.
Yep.
I actually have 5 characters that I'd like to inject into the Dojo Kun universe that are public domain. So my answer to your question is yes. I love that idea.
Excellent.
I've got
Uh,
concept art already done for those characters, and they're going to somehow be a part of the team story that I have written for maybe a couple years down the road called Trident's New Alliance.
Interesting. So yeah, we were sort of talking a little bit before, and I kind of mentioned, to me, seeing the comic book industry right now is sort of like like 490 whatever, you're in Rome, and you see the hordes coming over the mountains, approaching the city gates, and
Well,
we're at about that time when everything breaks down and it's just feudal states everywhere for 1,000 years. So how do you see going forward? What does the industry look like to you?
I think what's going to happen is the drama that's happening recently. It does feed the YouTube fire, if you will. A
Hmm.
lot of people are getting great super chats out of that. But on the other hand, the infighting is going to, I think, separate the boys from the men. I think that those people who can weather that storm, stop being so catty with one another, and just make good comic books. I know that a lot of people fall back on that, but yeah, that's really how you're going to reach your audience, is just write great comic books and try to raise the bar. Every time you write another one, try to make it better than your last. Because, one of the things that I was saying earlier about these comic book professionals that have been in the industry for 30 years, they've already got their momentum, right? They've already got their
Hmm.
legs under them. Some of us brand new at this, well, 10 years opposed to 30 is brand new. So, they've got their methodology, their stylized art and things like that. So they have a head start. Those of us who are also trying to, create these comics need to try to match their quality, their art style, their writing. And even if we fall short, it's best to try to emulate that and do the
Hmm.
best you can to create what you loved, either when you're in your formative years or even now. Like, for example, the ones that I always say that I try to emulate as a writer would be Marv Wolfman on the New Teen Titans or Chris
Oh,
Claremont on the X-Men. Do I
yeah.
think that I'll reach that level? Well, I hope to. And it would be up to the readers to tell me, well, you've got a ways to go, or hey, you're getting there, but let's see you do this next time. Or you know what I mean? I do welcome criticism.
Hmm.
Um, and criticism about the art form, though, not my show or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or whatever. But I mean, if you got criticism for the show, as long as you have it with the right intent, bring it on.
Um, Mark Millar, about a month ago, he had on 4 comic shop owners,
Yes.
talking about it, and the one in Columbus has already gone out of business.
Oh,
Uh, do you think that there will be any appreciable direct market left? I mean, there's always going to be some shop that's selling it, but is that like a viable business to just be a comic shop, or do you think in the next few years it's pretty much all going to be gone?
sadly, I think that it's going to go to the way of the dinosaur. I really think that just like comic books in the 7-Eleven and the Kroger and the Walmart, although they still have a few, I think that um, I think that that's going to be a thing of the past, and I lament that time because I loved going to the comic book store every Wednesday. That was a big deal. But I think that the main two are really crapping on the fans, telling us we're bigots, telling us that hey, you need a story that's about me and my life, not the character you've been reading over the last 50 years. I'm going to change that character to be something other. I think that they're doing that, and and I think Shane Davis said, people are going to the comic book store looking for Thor, and it's not Thor, it's Jane
Yeah.
Foster. They're looking for, I could go on. A lot of characters like that, they've changed so dramatically that when they go to the store looking for the character they want, they're not finding him. So they don't buy, and the comic book stores aren't selling. And I think that too, a lot of things that the comic book companies, the mainstream, are doing is they're even defeating the collectors. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is with the glut of variant covers. I collect She-Hulk comic books, and I wanted to collect everything she appeared in, including all of the variants. But when things like Secret Wars 2, #1 comes out, and there's 45 variant covers,
Yeah.
at least two of which anyway, are specific to two stores, one in Denver, one in New York. I'm pointing like this because I'm nowhere near either of those. So that means that those two comic books are so rare that the day after they sell, they're flipped on eBay for 4 or 5 times, maybe even more than that. Like a $4.99 cover that's, exclusive to Manhattan Comics is $100 the next day on eBay. So for me, a completist collector, there's no way I can get 45 covers, 2 of which are $100 each. There's just no way. So a lot of people say to me, well, then, just pick the ones you like. Just get the few that are good and you can afford. Agreed. That's what I ended up having to do. But I feel defeated by their gimmick because now I can't buy all of the covers I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely see that as a big problem. But I think there's even something more fundamental because there's really 3 reasons to buy comics. One is you just want cheap entertainment, which is what they were for us when we were kids.
Right.
The second is, like you mentioned, the collector's value, in that, if I buy this comic now, at some point in the future, it's going to go up. I'm
Hopefully.
hoping that my comic collection will end up paying out more than what Social Security will in a few years, but that's another issue. But the
Right.
third is, kind of being a completist, you want to see the story. And the problem is, when we were young, the only way you're going to know what happened before was to buy those back issues. So there was always going to be that kind of market for it. But now, you have, people making copies and putting the copies on the internet, scanning it and just putting it up. There's plenty of places you can download books. And the other thing is, not even just pirates, but I bought an X-Men DVD from Marvel that had all the books. It's probably like the late 2000s. I got that. So, now what's my incentive to go back and buy those older issues?
Okay.
I mean, in some ways it's good because it can really catch people up, but that takes out one of those motivations. And then,
Agreed.
and like you said, with those multiple covers, they're wildly overprinting, I think, for the value of the comics. Like it's just not going to hold up over the years. And we've already seen the collector's market bottom out in the 90s.
Right.
So, are we pretty much on the verge of that again when people seem like they don't want to spend money? And then now you have this glut. Like how many, to be perfectly honest, how many long boxes could all these stores have full of Score Girl issues?
Yeah, right.
You
And in fact, that goes to part of the cost it takes to maintain a comic book store. You've got a square
Yeah.
footage concern about either rent or mortgage, and your price per square foot matters. There was a comic book store in a very rich neighborhood that I used to pass through on the way home from work. I used to stop there, and the first time I went in, I started looking all around for the long boxes. And honestly, without telling a big long story, there weren't any. So I went up to the front desk. I said, "Where are your back issues?" And they said, "Oh, we don't sell back issues. The ones that don't sell from the shelf, we either return to the comic book company with the cover ripped off, or we sell for a huge discount to a store like Second and Charles." So, and in Second and Charles, they've got rows and rows of back issues. But this store said, we can't afford to be in this rich neighborhood and pay for the square footage for all of those back issues, which sit there sometimes for years before the collector needs issue 135, for example. And they come in there, oh, 135, awesome. But how long did it sit there and take up space? And we paid for it to sit there and take up space before the person bought it. it could very well be that's a loss if you think about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, wow, I had never thought about it that way, but they're right. And so yeah, some stores don't even sell back issues anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I mean, to me, the only way that any stores are going to survive is if you start crossing over. Like you have to have comics and games, or comics and on the stream with Mark Millar, they were complaining about, oh, we have to sell Funko Pops, and well, we
Right.
didn't get into it to sell Funko Pops, and it looks like Funko Pops are on their way out too.
Oh,
So it seems to me that the you have to have some kind of crossover. I mean, one of the strategies for me would be, have you by any chance ever been to Japan?
no, I haven't, despite the
Um,
name. Oh wait.
so they have something called manga kisa there. So a kisa-ten is a coffee shop, and those were popular, forever. And somewhere, like I think in the 90s, they people would leave manga that they bought, and they would just leave it in there. So somebody, like started getting a shelf, and they just put them on the shelves, and people would come in and start reading them. So that's how you get the manga cafes. And these things are huge. I lived there about 20 years ago, and I mean, you would go in, and it's just like a Barnes and Noble just full of manga that you could go and read, but you have to pay for coffee, you have to pay for
Right.
food, and then you could pay for like a little private booth where they have a nice recliner and you could read in privacy and stuff. I mean, if you had something along those lines in like a college town where you had students, okay, you got to buy a cup of coffee and go take a book off the shelf, and they have like reading copies there, and if they really liked it a lot, the store could order it for you, that sort of thing. Maybe that could work, but I think a lot of these stores are going under.
Agreed. Yeah, the crossover I think is important. I was thinking Funko Pops as soon as you said that, because the store that has no back issues has a huge wall of Funko Pops. And part of,
Yep.
I've got a couple. I made myself a promise: do not get into collecting those things, because I could see how it was exploding. Every kind of IP you can think of has Funko Pops, from television shows that have nothing to do with comics to
Yep.
movies to comics to games, all the way across. But I have a couple of them, and I noted and said to myself that what's going to happen is there's going to be so many of these that people can't possibly collect them all. And just like I was talking about the variants, it's going to fall out of favor unless you don't have the crazy collector's gene like I do, and you can just say, all right, I'm only buying Halo characters and nothing else, or I'm only buying Marvel and nothing else. But even that, there's several hundred Marvel Funko Pops.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like the Beanie Baby craze all over again.
Right. Yep. And you're right. They are falling out of favor. And I think that what's going to happen is those people who invested in all those Funko Pops are going to find that they've got a whole room full of rapidly declining in value toys, like the Beanie Babies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see independent publishers, sort of like yourself, or people who are just sort of like working on one book at a time? Do you ever see them sort of like coming together, like in maybe a confederation, if that's the right word, to like, all of you will sort of publish a book together? Like, let's say everybody has a 32-page story, right? So that puts you over 120 pages. Do you think it would be worth it for people to get together to sell a book, like an anthology or something like that?
I've seen a few anthologies work well. I know that Luke Stone with his he's got a book called Out of Obscurity. It took me a second to remember it. And there are, I think, 6 to 9 stories in Out of Obscurity, which is a collaboration of various creators and artists. And I think that one is working well. However, I've seen a group of creators come together to create a shared universe. And that one went very poorly because the person who was putting it together had grandiose schemes and thought he was far more business minded than he really was.
Mhm.
and it sort of fell apart. And unfortunately, you're going to have that in any group of people. You're going to have various levels of skill set levels, and I think that you'd have to be very, very careful. It's difficult. You want to make these businesses, you want your friends involved and all that, but as soon as you start involving friends in business, things can
Yeah.
go awry pretty quickly. So I would caution people against that. I would say don't get into business with friends. Just try to keep that at arm's length. If you want to get into business with other business people, then sometimes that would work well.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of wondering, where are people going to see new books? Because so my theory was when all the spinner racks went away, that really cut out the new people from coming into the market, which is why you see mostly old farts willing to spend good money on books. So you
Hey,
don't
what are you
have,
saying?
well, but I mean, you don't have kids who are like, oh, mom, take me to, 7-Eleven. I need to get the new issue of this or that. So you don't have people accidentally running into new things. So because you don't have that, you don't have the people who then want to go to comic book stores. There's no reason to go to a comic book store unless you already like comics. It's not like back in the day you'd see Spider-Man and you'd be like, oh, that's cool. And then you'd see them mention other characters like, oh, I don't know that. So then you go to a store specifically for it, and then you'd find those books.
Right.
So all the points of sale for traditional comics are pretty much going away. I guess the only place left is the internet.
And it's difficult to get eyes on your project. Number one, because there are so many out there. So
Yeah.
you're lost in a sea of comics. I really think if they went back to the spinner rack or back to the shelf in the grocery store or whatever, and I know Allegiance Comics started trying that, and honestly, I found them there, and I bought. They had 4 issues, three issues of each of their comics, and I think there are 4 or 5 of them in Walmart, and that's
Yep.
where I bought them. I've got all of those issues from the Legions, and now what they're doing is putting them together with a few extra issues in trade paperbacks. But what that does, just like you said, somebody walking by looking at the magazines would see the comics, and you might spark interest of a new fan, and that's just not happening anymore. I think that we have to get back to that.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, I agree. I was really hopeful for Allegiance, and I know that there was a lot of behind the scenes nonsense going on with that. But one of these days, I'd still like to have Mitch just talk and see what he's going to do in the future. Because I'd really hate, those books were gorgeous. I'd hate to see him just disappear.
Yeah, Mitch came on my show. He was a great guest. He was fun to talk to. However, it was right in the middle of his rise, as far as, if you want to call it that, and the popularity of the comics. And you're right. I knew about some of the behind the scenes thing. I tried to stay out of that, and just wanted him on to talk comics. And maybe you can have him on, and he could talk about the future.
Well, it'd be nice. I I don't even know how I get a hold of him these days. But so you have Shifter now. So are you planning on just doing the whole Shifter series, or do you have plans to do other comics in between, or what is the Dojo Kun publishing plan?
The publishing plan. Yeah, that's a good point. Once this one is done, actually, I can step back and say, once Projectile Reptile is fulfilled, I'm going to begin crowdfunding for Siamese 2, Trident's New Alliance. So that one is already underway. So long as Projectile Reptile is funded funded and fulfilled without too much loss, and the Shifter is successful. If those 2 things happen, Siamese 2 can happen. So, but there's a plan to have Siamese 2. Then following that, I've got the first 7 issues of Trident's New Alliance written. So there's a big long-term plan that this can keep rolling as long as the fans keep backing.
Nice. And so what comics are you excited about that are coming out? Whether they're indie, mainstream, what are you interested in right now?
Well, I'm super interested in the continuance of Clint Stoker's Downcast. I really think that that's very well written. He does crowdfund the trade paperbacks of his books, but he also goes through Pete Sammetti's um, Alterna Comics. So it's great to get.
I think he left Alterna.
Did he? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry, Clint.
yeah.
And then
I don't know. He kind of disappeared this last year.
Another one that I am super interested in getting and looking forward to is Michael Bancroft's The Lucent, Painted Death. And I'm also waiting just with anxiousness to get Reaper Destroyer from Joe Sontag.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Supposedly it's getting close to done.
Yeah, it's getting real close. And he's got so many things that he's added. And having back the Destroyer tier, I'm going to get the whole thing.
Nice.
So, yeah, it'll be fun. I'll do a big unboxing video when it gets here. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually put that out there. The sort of the catalyst or the inspiration for Projectile Reptile is somebody who was in the chat for quite a while. I don't know where he's been. Tentacle Pentacle was in the chat for quite a while, and he actually did some art for me. And I thought, that's such a clever name. I gotta do something like that. So he sort of inspired the idea to come up with Projectile Reptile.
Nice. Well, I know you have many things to do this evening, and I don't want to keep you too long.
Thank you.
So the link to the Fund My Comic is in the description. I also just put it in the chat. And there's also a link. Go follow Dojo Kun both here on YouTube. He's got a really fun show, a lot of guests, a different topic du jour, a debate, if you will. And go follow him on Twitter as well. So links to all three in the description.
Oh, thanks very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, of course. So everyone, if you're still here Wednesday, I have Ed Jowett from Shades of Vengeance. He's coming out with a new tabletop role-playing game. It's a Western with demons. That's very cool. And he also publishes comics. So I don't know exactly what he's got up his sleeve to publish now, but he said he's got one he wants to talk about.
Excellent.
So now that will be a special Wednesday at 3 p.m. show. He is in the UK, so we can't go too late.
Okay. Yep.
And for myself, keep an eye out. Empire of the Undying Sun, my campaign guide for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Big announcements coming this month, probably later in the month, but it's coming. Seriously. Really this time. And I believe Friday night I will be on the Dungeon Delvers channel. I think Classic Gamma World is starting back up. So Dungeon Delvers at 9 p.m. for Gamma World. All right.
Excellent.
So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you all soon.